This is the Mooks and the Gripes podcast. Hello, everybody. This is Trevor. Affectionately, Paul. Paul, happy Valentine's Day. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy Valentine's Day to you, too. Feeling, very warm and fuzzy this morning.
Well, good. We, for once, are here to talk about our love for books.
Yes.
You know, we
very
thought
different.
Maybe it was time.
Bit of a shocker episode for everyone, I think.
Yeah, we tried to come up with some love that we have for books. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how much we have to say. Probably not more than several hours worth if we didn't edit it down. But all right. Well, before we begin, I did want to thank a new Patreon subscriber, Pete O'Connor, subscribed at the $1 level. Thank you so much, Pete. Just as a reminder for folks, on Patreon, we do bonus episodes that are, just kind of random. We try not to burn through ideas we would have for the mainline podcast, but we talk a lot more about what we're reading, things like that on the bonus episodes. But everybody who subscribes gets access to those. It's not just at a certain tier. And then people on Patreon also get our episodes on Tuesdays rather than on Thursdays. So a little bit early. I don't know how much of a perk that is. If you like things on Tuesday, great. There's not much going for Tuesday in general.
Exactly.
So,
it needs a little help.
So that's something that I think is kind of fun, and we like to try to do as much as we can, and usually it works out just fine. So Thanks so much, Pete. We hope you enjoy those perks, and anybody else who wants to subscribe, it's patreon.com/mookse, MOOKSE. Pretty easy to find, and we of course link to it in the newsletter and things like that. So
thank you very much, Pete. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it is very much appreciated. We use these funds to put back into the show. And one thing I'll just let people know, I actually found a much cheaper option for the website, much cheaper and more stable and faster.
Oh, nice.
So seems like that might be worth it. Well, so there will be a little bit more of the money to put back into other parts of the show. So thanks again, everybody who subscribes on Patreon. Thanks everybody who's listening in general. We love doing this. We need to do a little bit more. We've been really good in the past at engaging with our listeners and having listener feedback and things like that. And I know it kind of comes and goes in phases as people just settle in and start listening to the show, but we need to start figuring out ways to dig in there again.
I was thinking that too.
We probably, burned through a lot of our ideas over the holidays, and now we're coasting, and we can't do that for our listeners. We will straighten up.
That's right. Get back in the swing of it.
Well, what have you been reading, Paul?
Yeah, I have been reading several different things. A lot of my reading recently has been heavily influenced by a couple of reading groups that I'm currently in that I've mentioned in the past. This one will be a recurring theme throughout 2023, but I'm still involved in that year-long read for Joseph and His Brothers by Thomas Mann. Coming up on probably roughly the 200-page mark, I would say. So, almost done. It's like 1,500 pages. So it definitely will take all year. But it's been a very interesting experience. The introduction is very esoteric and fascinating, but not necessarily easy, I would say. And so that takes up, I'd even seen some people recommend that you start elsewhere within the book and then go back and revisit that.
Oh, wow.
I did not. I went ahead and plunged through that. And then now, making my way through, getting my, feel of it. The first quarter of the book has a lot more to do with Jacob than Joseph. So it's focusing a lot on him, and it's taken a while to kind of catch the rhythm. It's very different than the Magic Mountain. It's an odd book for sure, but also really fascinating. And one thing in particular that I've really enjoyed is he kind of explores the various religions and beliefs that were swirling around the area during this time. And so there's these passages that go into astrology and mysticism, but then it's also focusing on kind of the emergence of how monotheism was starting to make its way in and stuff. So it's really, like I said, I'm still 200 pages in, not exactly sure what to make of it, but I find myself more and more compelled and kind of swept up in it. So that's one thing. And then the other reading group, which I think will sound familiar to you, Trevor, is joining in with Kim, I told you, I wasn't necessarily going to jump into every book for her NYRB women's reads this year. And you probably remember the hashtag. I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's NYRB Women 23.
Yeah, that's right. So, but Vicky Baum's Grand Hotel came up, and that was one I have had on my shelf for a long time. During our hotels episode, Jackie brought it up, and that kind of re-sparked my interest. And so when I saw this, it was too good to pass up. So, yeah, I have been reading that, and for one thing, the beginning of that, I just love the cast of characters and the way that she introduces them. I saw somebody say it's almost like a play, and I think that's very accurate at the beginning. But just this cast of odd characters has been really compelling. And there was just a quick excerpt I was going to read, that just an example of how her writing style kind of lays out what these characters are thinking, which I think is really well done. So it says, being alone, he knew what that meant. This was more or less what he said. He was too alone in Berlin, absolutely alone. He had cut the threads. He had severed various ties, such were the carefully chosen phrases he used, and now he was alone in Berlin. After spending all his life in Fredersdorf's, he felt stupid, of course, in a great city, but not so stupid that he could not see his own stupidity. He knew little of life, but now he wanted to get to know it. He wanted to know life as it really was. That was why he was here. But, he went on, where is real life? I've not come on it yet. I've been to a casino, and here I am sitting in the most expensive hotel, but all the time I know it isn't the real thing. All the time I have a suspicion that real, genuine, actual life is going on somewhere else, and is something quite different. When you don't belong to it, it's not at all so easy to get into it, if you see what I mean. Yes, but what's your notion of life? Said Dr. Ottenschlag. Does life even exist as you imagine it? The real thing is always going on somewhere else. When you're young, you think it will come later. Later on, you think it was earlier. When you are here, you think it is there, in India, in America, or somewhere. But when you get there, you find that life is doubled back and is quietly waiting here in the very place you ran away from. It is the same with life as it is with the butterfly collector and the swallowtail. As you see it flying away, it is wonderful, but as soon as it is caught, the colors are gone and the wings bashed. I thought, oh, that was just such an excellent thought, and it captures so much of, not only life, but that alienation of kind of being in a big city or at a fancy hotel, and you're like, wow, like this is all it is. Like I had these expectations for it, and I really like how she captures that, but also then ties it into, kind of the fleetingness of life, and how you always feel like the next stage will be the one, or in the past was the time that you really should have focused on. So anyway, so yeah, I've been enjoying that. And then the one other book that I've been reading is Translating Myself and Others by Jhumpa Lahiri. We've talked about our love of her for a long time on this show, and this one's great. It's actually the second book on the art of translation that I've read recently after Kate Briggs' This Little Art. And I've just really enjoyed seeing the different ways that translators approach their craft and how personal it is for them. This book in particular is made up of different pieces that Lahiri has written over the last maybe not quite decade, but ever since she started kind of exploring Italian and she moved to Rome, and her life took her professional life, and it sounds like her personal life, took some very interesting turns. But it's just really interesting to kind of read about her relationship with not only Italian, but English and some of the other languages that she grew up being exposed to, and just how it's all evolved and shifted over time. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend that for anybody who is kind of interested in, who enjoyed This Little Art or some of these other books on translation. This is another good one that kind of ties into that theme. So those are the three that have been keeping me busy these days.
Awesome. And they're also good.
I know. I feel
I guess I don't know about Joseph and his brothers, but it sounds like that one's a good experience.
It is.
For sure.
It is. It's a good one to read slowly and kind of digest. But yeah, the combo of the three has been working really well.
Well, let me go on just a little bit more in Grand Hotel, if you don't mind, because that's what I'm reading as well. So the part that you read is an exchange between my two favorite characters in the novel. It's a man who has arrived in Grand Hotel wanting to finally live a little bit and realizing, I don't know if this is it. And then the other man, the more cynical one, is a doctor who has been through a lot in his life, who's basically got his bags packed. He doesn't really care about life anymore at all. Bad combination.
Yeah, absolutely.
For these two, but they found each other here. And the doctor keeps on kind of explaining things to this man who's shown up, kind of thinking, "Hey, I'm going to finally break away from some of the shackles and live a little bit." And the doctor says to him that it's the same with the bar stool. And he's like, "What bar stool?" And he goes, "The bar stool you spoke of a moment ago. Bar stools are not so very high, you said. You imagined they would be higher, eh? Didn't you say that? Well, then one imagines everything higher than it is, till one sees it. You come on your travels from your little provincial town with false ideas about life. Grand hotel, you think. Most expensive hotel, you think. God knows what marvels you expect from a hotel like this. You'll soon know all about it. The whole hotel is only a rotten pub. It is exactly the same with the whole of life. The whole of life is a rotten pub, Herr Kringelin. You arrive, stay for a while, and go on again, passing through. Isn't that it? For a short stay, what? What do you do in a big hotel? Eat, sleep, lounge about, do business, flirt a little, dance a little, eh? Well, and what do you do in life? 100 doors along one corridor, and nobody knows a thing about his next door neighbors. When you leave, another arrives and takes your bed. it's 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 really good book. There are plenty of other characters, a lot of fun intrigue, but those are the two. I'm like, what does it say about me that these are the two I'm most like? I want to read more about them.
Oh,
Um,
I noticed that
anyway,
too, and I'm glad you gave a little bit more of this of the background, because I know you've read it
we
and
got to
probably
cheat
have.
a little bit for
Yeah,
that.
I like that. No, this is your second read, right? Second time
Yeah.
through it. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, the
Yeah,
first time was clear back in 2016, though, which doesn't sound like it's that long ago to me, but it's been a while.
I know. When you revisit books, even if you look at, like you said, if it's been 2016, it's like, oh, I should remember most of that. And
Uh
at least for me, that's not always the
huh.
case.
Well, the other book that I'm reading is one that comes out this very week from Transit Books. It's The Birthday Party
Mm.
by Laurent Mauvignier. My gosh, Paul. This book has been an absolute shocker. It's translated by Daniel Levin Becker, who is an American writer who is tied with the Ulipo
Mm.
movement. It is amazing. The book itself is, and I didn't know very much about it, but it's kind of a thriller, uh, but a very, very literary. I'm going to write page long sentences, and Daniel Levin Becker translates these things so well. I mean, I guess I can't read the original, but what I'm reading here is remarkable. And the very first page is its own full sentence. And the thing that I love about it, it's an actual sentence. It's not one of these where someone's just putting in a bunch of semicolons or commas to connect what could really be sentences to kind of
Mm-hmm.
um, mimic a free flowing train of thought, which I like. That's fine. But this is a sentence with clauses that are linked together the way that you'd map them out in English class, and it's just fascinating. This is a big thing throughout, apparently, because when I finished reading a bit last night, I thought, what's going on with this book? Like, what are the reviews? I want to know what people are saying about it, because I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these serendipitous moments, Martin Riker, who's
Oh,
the guest lecture I just read, and we talked
yeah.
about him and the Dorothy Project and his wife Danielle Dutton um, a bit over the last month or two. He reviewed it for the New York Times, and he just has great. I mean, he's a great writer in and of his own right, and has great things and a great way of saying these things about the sentences in this book. But it is captivating as well. It's not just like, oh, that was a beautiful sentence.
Right.
That's all there is to it. I didn't want to stop reading last night, and I was a little bit intimidated because the text is a little bit small, and it's a 400-page book. But I thought, no, it's coming out this week. I want to get going. Man, completely pulled in. These lush, complex sentences are a delight to get lost in and kind of figure your way through. And I mean that. I don't mean that it's an intellectual delight. I mean I am thrilled by this thrilling introduction to these characters and to this book that takes place in rural France in a little hamlet with 3 homes. One is owned by a man named Patrice, and he has inherited the hamlets, his hamlet, basically the family farm. And his wife Marion and their daughter Ida live there. And then they have a neighbor named Christine, who is about in her late 60s, who is an artist who lives there. The other house is unoccupied. It's for rent or for sale, and it's Patrice's wife's 40th birthday, and so he's planning on this thing. And I haven't quite gotten very far, but the way it begins is Patrice has taken Christine into town. He's got his own things to do, and he's dropping her off at the police office because she has been getting these anonymous letters that are getting increasingly more and more threatening.
Thanks.
But the interiority of these characters, again, some people do this and it's like, oh, that's really impressive. That's really cool. This is like impressive and thrilling and just enthralling. This is, I've only read like 30 pages, but I'm like, this is probably going to be one of my books of the year.
Wow.
I mean, we'll see, but I am that delighted with what I've gotten so far. And so strong recommendation for the birthday party. At least the first 30 pages, if that's all you're interested. If that's enough to sell it, I'll be back with more. I'm sure it'll probably take me a few weeks to read it.
Although at the rate that you're going so far, it sounds like maybe you'll finish it tonight.
We'll see. I've been reading it a lot. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But a lot of it has been because I'm pacing myself through books, and so I'm able to handle short ones and longer ones without feeling like any of them are crowding out the others. It's been awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad it's working so well. That's cool.
But all right, as we said at the beginning, this episode we're going to devote some of our affection to books. It's Valentine's Day. It's that time to be, romantic and a little bit cheesy, perhaps.
I was going to say modeling.
So we have come up with several categories that I'm kind of, we didn't really sit down and discuss this. That'll surprise nobody. So I don't know exactly what how we're both going to take them. But one, a book you broke up with. The next one, a book that you regret. It just wasn't meant to be. A fling, a book where, it's complicated. A book where you'd be able to talk about as love at first sight. A book you'd love to check out. And a book you'd love to get your hands on. And then lastly, a book with which we have a committed long-term relationship. So let's dig into these, right. Paul. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
People need to let us know how this worked out.
I think it'll be fun. So are we starting with book we broke up with, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what is a book that you broke up with, Paul? And tell me a little bit about how that went. Was it you? Was it the book?
It's never the other person, right? It's not you, it's me. Yeah, actually I do think that's probably the case in this one. I don't actually break up with books all that often, for the simple fact that I feel like by the time that I usually start to read a book, thanks to you and so many of our friends out there, and the amount of time I do kind of researching and culling and mulling and thinking about books, like often by the time I dive in, I'm pretty sure it's going to be something I'll at least appreciate, if not enjoy. But there are exceptions, and unfortunately this one was. It's The High Sierra, a love story by Kim Stanley Robinson. I had never read any of his books before, but I believe you, and I know Dorian and a few other people have read some of his books. And
not me. Not
okay.
Me.
Okay.
I've wanted to, but I haven't yet.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, this was my first.
So you're saying his books are available?
Yes.
Like I could. You won't
They're
be
available.
upset if
they're
I go
on the market. Exactly. Absolutely. No, but this one, it's weird because everything about it seems like it should be right up my alley. It's billed as a love story to the Sierra Nevadas. It's described as a gorgeous, absorbing immersion in a place born out of a desire to understand and share one of the greatest rapture-inducing experiences our planet offers. It's packed with maps, gear advice, more than 100 breathtaking photos, and much more. So I don't know. Like when I heard about it, I immediately got it from the library because I was like, man, this sounds great. It's all focused on one area, which is, as I've said, something I really love. It's supposed to be really good nature writing. It's from this author who I know people I respect, really like him. But man, I just could not do it. For one thing, it's like almost 600 pages long. And I mean, it is gorgeous.
Mm.
There's lots of photos and maps and different things in there, which I liked, but I stuck with it for a good 150 pages. But something about the writing just really threw me off. It was a weird mix of like, it would jump around from deeply personal to very like geological, but like from page to page with like very little connection. And something about his writing style for me, it was this the terminology that he used, and it was like a very informal, but like almost in like a, I don't know, it's almost like a, I can't even describe what it was. Like I could read a little passage, and I don't know if this will convince anybody, but it's him and his friend who are kind of climbing up this mountain, and it says Terry put on the jets as he passed them, shaking his head in silent disapproval of a group that big and slow. Not that we were the fastest people up there. A clutch of runners ran down past us, quadriceps bouncing foursquare over their knees. And like I said, I don't know that any particular excerpt is going to like prove my point, but this is definitely
I hate it.
Yeah. See? Case closed. No, and like I said, I don't know. It is definitely, it's funny you mentioned that. I do feel like it's one of those, as I so often do when I quit a book. It's not the book. It's often me. Like this might be the perfect book for a lot of people, and based on what I see on Amazon and Goodreads, I think it absolutely is. I think there's a lot of people out there who are big fans of his or who really love this book, but for whatever reason, a combination of all those factors, we broke up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we talk often about getting on a book's wavelength, which almost sounds like your relationship with a book is, a little bit based on physics, but it is chemistry as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mixture of things, and how will you combine with it? Your life experiences and what it's trying to say and how it's trying to say it. I think you're 100% right. Some things just work at certain times for us, and some things never will, but they work well for other people. And there's no, there's no reason to say in this particular case it's because it's a bad book or
No.
because everyone else is wrong, which a lot of people go there, but we don't do that with our, relationships.
Right.
I don't have romantic feelings for so and so, so why does anybody else?
Exactly.
And I know we're being a little bit silly here, but it is something I've tried to do a little bit better at, not trying to say this book is great and therefore anyone who doesn't feel the same as I do about it is clearly inept or a bad reader.
Yeah.
It's chemistry.
Yeah, and it's a dangerous thing to start to like reading. Just like relationships, they're so personal. It's something I've told both of my boys. Like when you get with your friends and they have a friendship that you disagree with, or they are dating someone who you don't like or whatever, I said, tread carefully, because those are the kinds of things where like you get into this, and just because somebody's not your favorite person doesn't mean that they're not a good fit for that other person. And I think that's very true with books too, because it is a very personal and emotional thing. And that's why, like I said, it's very odd to me. It's funny how on paper this book was written for me, but
Yeah, it sounds just like something I might, if I saw it in a second hand, I'd be like, Paul, I'm picking this up for
I
you.
know exactly.
I'm
And who
setting
knows?
you up.
That's right. Blind date. No, who knows? Maybe someday I will rethink it and give it another whirl. But like I said, if it had been, 250 pages, I might have just stuck with it. But
Yeah.
150 pages into 600 pages, it wasn't meant to be.
Well, the book I broke up with is one I've already talked about because I had a similar thought as you. I don't break up with books very often, or at least it's not memorable. I might have dipped my toe into something and decided it wasn't the time or not for me, and that's just not memorable.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a book that I have tried to have a good relationship with many times. You know it. It's War and Peace.
Yes, I do.
I sometimes feel like I should give War and Peace a call again. try to rekindle this thing that we should have. It again, like you
Hmm.
said, kind of fits all the boxes, and there is a draw there, but it just hasn't ever worked out, even though I feel a real attraction to it. I mean,
Hmm.
I really do sometimes think I need to just buckle down and actually do it. And if I sit and talk about this, I'm like, oh, I probably should do it. But
Yeah.
I've done that 4 or 5, 6 times in my life,
Mm.
each time with the same end result. I just think it needs to be a clean break. But, I
Yeah.
have people like you who
Complicate
have
matters.
had good relationships with these books,
Hmm.
and so I haven't necessarily thrown my copies away or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So we'll see
it's
how it goes.
interesting. Yeah. And we've talked about this. They're like, maybe, in 10 years, in 20 years, it'll be that time. But that's part of the magic, or the allure of reading to me, is you just never know. And that's kind of what's so fun
Yeah,
about it. It's so mysterious, but it may just be a case of two ships passing in the night.
could be. All right, a book that you regret it just wasn't meant to be. I
Yes.
mean, some
This
of these
one.
are very closely related to other things. I mean, I could have put War and Peace here, maybe,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
that does feel more like an actual breakup. Like we tried, it was ugly at times, sometimes thrilling, always promising, and then it just wasn't.
Yeah. No, this.
But a book, there are other types of books I just regret it. Just never, should fit, should been right,
Right.
just wasn't meant to be.
This is one that it almost immediately popped in my mind when you mentioned this, because it came fairly early when I was kind of making several of these books. I noticed came during my, how you go through different transitions. And we've talked about this, where I was starting to explore, quote unquote, literary fiction, or starting to expand my horizons to discover all these different types of books that were out there. And this one was talked up so much on some of the forums and different places where I was around that time period, that I got my hopes up really high. And the book is House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. Um, I'll just, a lot of people may be familiar, but it's basically centered. I'll just read a little bit from Wikipedia, because I don't think I could summarize it. It came out in 2000. It centered on a fictional documentary about a family whose house contains a seemingly endless labyrinth. The format and structure of the book is unconventional, with unusual page layout and style, making it a prime example of ergodic literature, which I don't know what that is, but contains copious footnotes, many of which contain footnotes themselves, including references to fictional books, films, or articles. Some pages contain only a few words or lines of text arranged in strange ways to mirror the events in the story, often creating very strange effects. At points, the book must be rotated to read. So, reading all that again, it's like, at least in theory, like, that sounds pretty cool. And when
Yeah.
it's had so much hype surrounding it, and I was like, it has like a lot of horror elements. There's this house where it doesn't fit into space the way that it should. And so there's lots of like, they're doing measurements and it shows a certain thing, but then like people get lost in there for days. So like all of that, I'm like, whoa, that sounds so good. But I feel like this book is like the direct source of like many of my reading pet peeves. um, I it's tricksy, that term tricksy. It's
Oh
not,
yes.
and in my opinion at least, it doesn't hold up. It's a lot of surface. There's certain words are blue every time they show up. Like they said, you have to rotate the book to read it. It was one of the first examples I had seen of like, where the text becomes so compressed that you can't even read it. Or on the flip side, there's like one word per page. And if that it, if it had worked for me as a book, if I'd felt like he'd followed through on what he was trying to do, then I probably would have loved it. But for me, just the further on into it I got, it just lost its way, and I felt like it was like all surface but no depth underneath it. So yeah, it wasn't meant to be, for the simple fact that like I really did try, I got my hopes up. And again, it like you said, in some ways it's similar to the book I broke up with, where in theory it should have been something probably that I might have liked. And I know, again, a lot of people love it. A lot of people, when I've seen like lists of like what was the most important book so far in this century, and like some people
Hmm.
mentioned this book, and but to me it was just The Emperor Has No Clothes, I guess, kind of a
Huh.
thing. So yeah.
Dang. Did you finish it?
I did. Yeah, I did. I mean, it was.
So you didn't break up with it.
I didn't
That's
break
why.
up with it. That's where I felt like this one regret it wasn't meant to be, because it could have been the beginning of a beautiful relationship,
Yeah.
but it wasn't.
Mine's kind of similar. I did finish the book and have regrets because it's an author who I feel like I should like, and there it's the first one that really kind of made a splash in the English language. And there have been two more since that have come out, and one coming out here in a couple of months, and I've never read any of the rest of them, though I'm kind of like, well, I probably should. There should be more here. But it's Han King's The Vegetarian, which was
Mm,
translated by Deborah Smith, whom I really like, and all of that. Uh, I don't know. Did you read The Vegetarian?
I did not, but I know that many, many people did.
Yeah, it seems everyone else felt pretty strongly about it. I did like it, and probably part of the issue for me was I read it after I'd read so much like This Is It, and it's
Hmm.
getting, big attention nationally, for especially for a book of translated fiction. And it just, I thought it was funky and in a good way, but kind of cold in a bad way. I didn't ever quite know what I was doing with it.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I wish it worked. I mean, I think that the White Book and Human Acts both have good covers
Mm,
and sound intriguing. And then Greek Lessons that comes out here in a few months, it sounds intriguing. She did have an excerpt from Greek Lessons in the New Yorker recently. It's about a woman who loses her voice during a Greek lesson class, and the professor is losing his eyesight. And I'm like, I don't know. That that in and of itself does not captivate me. That
mm,
sounds weird. Like I don't know if I need to try it out and just see, maybe.
yeah,
But maybe again it's just not meant to be.
right. It's interesting, but with both of ours, for the ones that wasn't meant to be, there was an expectation going into it. We had heard it talked up, or some
Yeah.
people were raving about it, and often, I mean, I feel like we're both pretty independent readers in a lot of ways. Like, we're not necessarily led by the zeitgeist, but there are times where,
Mm-hmm.
Ken, or Solenoid, or all these different books that kind of get a lot of buzz. I mean, I like that, and I enjoy it, and I get
Mm-hmm.
excited, and often it does pay off. But I wonder sometimes if the expectations, that you have going into a book like this might end up being part of the reason that you just, can't make it work.
Yeah. Any flings you want to bring up, Paul?
Flings,
Sorted
yes.
or whatever they are, they might be.
Well, I thought about this, and the way that I decided to define it was something that worked really well for a short period in its time, but when you revisit it, it just, doesn't hold up, doesn't stand the test of time. So for me, that was Jeffrey Eugenides' The Marriage Plot.
uh,
Again, it's interesting. A lot of these books that came to mind for me did come up around the same time period in my reading. And I don't know if that was like a formative time where, like I said, I was starting to kind of spread my wings and just see what else was out there. But I first read it pretty shortly after it came out. So somewhere probably around 2012. And I had previously read and really enjoyed both The Virgin Suicides and Middlesex. Um, and like I said, it was part of my kind of, maybe he was maybe one of the people who
hmm,
kind of led me into this whole idea of whatever literary fiction means, but that idea
right.
of just what it might mean. Um, there was roughly a 10-year gap between Middlesex and then this one. So when it came out, I was really excited and snatched it up. And at the time, I remember I enjoyed it pretty well, or, I did enjoy it, but um, I don't think it quite ever matched up to the previous books in my mind. But, when you read about it, it's like about this woman who's an English major. She's writing her senior thesis on Jane Austen and George Eliot. It kind of explores the whole idea of the marriage plot that, lies at the heart of a lot of these, great, literary novels. And, but it kind of like puts a modern spin on it, I guess. And so, like I said, when I read it, I thought it was pretty good, but I tried to reread it
Hmm.
maybe a year ago, and it just fell pretty flat for me. It didn't hold up at all. So I do think the idea of a fling, maybe in the time period you have some affection for that author, you are at the right point of your life where you maybe give it more of a benefit of a doubt than you would later, or it just hits you a certain way. And there are those cases where rereading can be a wonderful experience. We've talked about that, but there are sometimes those cases where you realize, you've moved on, it's no
Yeah.
longer going to work. And that was definitely a case for this one. It's not a bad book. I wouldn't say anything like that, but it just maybe either of its time or at least not for me anymore.
Oh, different take on a fling. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're 100% on, but my fling is books like, again, a series that I've talked about and I'm up to date. It's Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files.
Oh yeah.
These books about. I mean, honestly, Paul. When I was carrying those around, that's what I was reading. Someone would be like, "Oh, what you reading?" Uh, yeah. Let's see. Well, it's a book about a wizard who's a PI in Chicago. It's so like, what? How do you even talk about it? But I had a great time,
Right.
I had a great time. I admit don't feel a lot of connection to it beyond that great time.
Mm-hmm.
That's about what it is. But there's another one that'll come out here in a year or two. I'm going to revisit this. I'm going to go back to it. I'll have another great time. I'm confident in it.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, that kind of just had a bit of a feel of a fling to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm in. I don't have to remember it afterwards.
Right.
And
I
I
like
probably
that.
won't tell everybody about it.
That's funny. I like that definition. Yeah. You set your expectations ahead of time. You know what you're getting into.
Yeah, but I did enjoy them. I really did. And my brother-in-law, I got him to start reading them, and we got to where we were basically reading the same ones at the same time. And it's not like we had these deep conversations about these books. It was more like, "Hey, can you believe that happened? Oh, I know, that's crazy." And that was about it.
Right.
That was about it. There's not a whole lot more to discuss in them, but we are looking forward to them. They are fun. I'll still consider them fun,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm glad that I found them. They fit that need.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like that.
Our next category is it's complicated,
It's
and
complicated.
I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear what you have to say here.
Okay. This is something that I have a hard time even talking about it. I've mentioned it before, though.
A good
So,
introduction.
yeah. Toni Morrison and Beloved in particular.
Oh,
It's
okay.
complicated. It is. It really is. I've read it twice. I've read Beloved twice, along with several other of her books, because I know that there is so much there. I can see it. I can feel it. I'm aware of it. I admire it. I respect it, but I just don't love it. Um, I absolutely understand the importance of her works, and I'll kind of keep it focused on Beloved, but this is true of all of the ones that I've read. The reason that it's revered, but I've just never been able to connect with it on the level that I feel like I should, and that's why it's complicated. I can feel the draw. I understand the power and the value of it, and I will continue to read her for those very reasons. And I keep hoping that someday the light bulb will go on, and I will just suddenly be, flooded with, not just respect, but the love that I feel like these books probably deserve in a lot of ways. But I don't know. I've debated about this like a year or so ago. Kim McNeil and I read one of her other ones, kind of as a buddy read together. And again, I enjoyed it, but I just couldn't quite feel that reverence and love for it that I feel like so many people do. So this has been
Hmm.
going since college when I first read Beloved. So it's a tangled, complicated relationship that's spanned over decades. And I, not that I feel guilt, because I don't think that's what books are about. But if there was ever a book that I felt guilty that I couldn't quite find that level that I want to with, it's probably Beloved. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had the same experience with Beloved,
Mm-hmm.
as well, and I read it a few times, and even when I was back teaching, I put it as an option for an assigned reading. Like with my students, I never in the literature classes I was teaching, we would have our assigned reading from the curriculum and all of that, but I wanted them to read some contemporary works that they might not have any experience with. It was a an American literature class, and I didn't want them just to be reading, Henry James and going back that way. And so I even put that one as an option for them to read, because I wanted to dig into it more and be able to help them through it. And I did enjoy it a lot, but yeah, it's not one of my favorites. I want to read more of hers. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm in a similar boat. I haven't actually read any others of hers, which I, you know, I feel like I'm being negligent about part of my whole hopes is who I am as a human being,
Right.
and that I should be able to get behind it and support it and proselytize for it,
I
because
know.
it's important. And she's a Nobel winner, an American uh, writer, female, black. Such important historical um, stories and contemporary resonance that is just vital.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it feels a little bit like I'm not who I think I am.
I know. That's what I mean. It haunts me. It really does. And like I said, that's not something I necessarily think that reading should do or needs to be about. But
Hmm.
at the same
Right.
time, there are, yeah, I don't know. Um, I don't know how it is complicated. That's why I can't really seem to talk too clearly about it. But it's funny. It's spanned a long time, and it keeps coming back to me. And I'm sure I'll keep, scratching away at that itch and trying to figure out what it is. I plan to continue to read her work, and I have a whole shelf full of her books that, I plan to read. So I will report back.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I will. I think I might read one or two of them this year.
Mm,
Uh, for first off, one of the, that bookmark I was telling you about that my wife is doing at the library, the
yeah.
50 book challenge. Um, I have 17 or 18 of them already stamped.
Oh, wow.
And but a couple of them, one's an American classic, and I still don't know what to read for that, and the other one is a banned book. And for both of those, I thought, well, I should take this as an opportunity to read more Toni Morrison.
Yeah,
So,
that would be a great way to do it.
all right, my it's complicated. I think it's interesting. I also went with an author more than
Mm,
a particular book, but mine's an author I do love,
mm.
pulls me in, and I feel like maybe I shouldn't. And I'm wondering how you'll respond to this, if you're feeling the complications of over the last 10 years in particular. Philip Roth.
Mm,
I
mm-hmm.
love his books. They are a big part of who I, was as a reader, 15, 20 years ago, and then throughout until he finished writing. And I also kind of despise some of the stuff in them. I
Yes.
despise some of what he has stood for. I don't think he was an evil, awful person, because I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something about that. There was I think it was in the Guardian. Someone wrote a piece on, shouldn't straight white males also be able to write about sex and love and their entanglements? And I'm like,
There's,
uh, have you ever read a book by a straight white male, especially
right.
over the 20th century?
There's no shortage.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be
Um,
fine.
but him in particular, and just the treatment of women. And I'll say it came to the fore with Blake Bailey's biography.
Right, right, right.
That was so infuriating to me, what happened with that. Not what Norton did by pulling it, and but what Blake Bailey did,
Yeah.
because I was reading the biography when all that happened. They sent me an early copy. I'd been looking forward to it for like a decade.
Me too.
I'd been in touch with Blake Bailey. We'd chatted about it, and as I'm reading it, I'm sitting there thinking, what is going on? There's so much in here that is the stuff I don't like,
Yeah.
and seeming to treat it like fun, and like, I don't
Flippant.
know, it was like I was in reading a boys club book, and I didn't like that. And it made me realize, as it happened, part of this is because of Blake Bailey and who he turned out to be in
Yep.
his own situation, um, and the things that he might be attracted to in Roth's biography and in Roth's work. But I thought, that's not what I like about Roth. So what is it that I do? Why? Sure, he
Mm.
can write a sentence, but why am I so captivated? Why do I really love some of his stories, like The Ghost Rider. I love The Ghost Rider. It has an absolutely abhorrent ending. I don't think the ending is wrong. I don't think that it is something that we should, I'm not saying the ending, I hated the ending. I think the ending is powerful, but it's because it is so horrible and
Mm.
humiliating to a woman. And there's so much of that in his books that I can't sit back and think, oh, I just love it unconditionally. So
Mm-hmm.
it's complicated. I don't quite understand it. Um, I don't agree with it. He and I knew this even when, he was alive and I was reading his work. I'd never want to sit down with him.
Oh yeah.
He could be pleasant in his speeches and all, but I could never sit down and have a meal with him and chat about books in general or anything like that. Just not someone
Mm-hmm.
I would have ever been able to get along with, I don't think. So what is it about his books? I don't know. But that's the complicated one for me. And maybe we'll have a Roth episode someday or something like that where I
Yeah.
can really try and therapeutically get my way through this. Or maybe we just won't because some of these things are a big part of our pasts, and it's okay to move on. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great example, and I mulled over taking a similar approach. I mean, he did come to mind for me, and there are other authors where it gets complicated with that whole tension between the author as a person or what they may have stood for or things they did in their life versus the work itself. And I know that's a huge discussion that
Mm-hmm.
we could have whole episodes about that. I remember Mark Haber talked about Celine, Death on the Installment Plan, and some of those that were some of his very favorite books that New Directions ever published. But he brought up the fact of the complications that come with
Yeah.
the biographies of these people. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's, political, sometimes it's other things like their treatment of women or things that they've said. I mean, these days, social media, there's, the J.K. Rowling stuff, or just there are so many things where it does get complicated. And I don't know that there's always a right answer to the way that handles it. So
And I think for me with this Roth stuff, if I don't have any daughters, I have 4 sons, but my wife and such, if I can't recommend these books to them
mm,
because they're offensive,
mm-hmm,
what's up then? Because
mm,
I have thought about that in the past. No, you will not like these books by Philip Roth.
right,
They don't treat you well. I
right.
love them, but and it's just so, I don't know. It's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough.
no, that's a really, really important point. Yeah, no,
We should get back to the
complicated.
love. We should
Yeah,
get
we
back to
should.
the love. uh, Sorry, I don't want to cut you off though. Do you
No,
have
no,
any?
no. I was just kind of, yeah. It's just, I guess love is complicated. We'll just put it that way. It can be. It doesn't
Sure,
always.
and not always pretty either. Not always. Sometimes you love something that you really objectively should not,
Right.
and it's okay to explore that a little bit. But
Mm-hmm. There's
it's
not always a logical answer, though, right?
it's Valentine's Day love we're talking about today, right? Shouldn't we? Shouldn't we get
That's
back
right.
to that romance and that infatuation and
Let's
and
get
the
back
the,
to the
the
candy
deep
hearts.
meaningful stuff? Yes,
Exactly.
the candy hearts, the deep meaningful stuff. I heart you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that actually works. What's the next one we have on here is Love at First Sight.
Yes. So the way I took this one is I was walking through a bookstore one day and I was just kind of perusing over the shelves and I ended up as I've told you, sometimes I'll end up in the nature section. And this book just jumped out to me, and I've talked about it a little bit before. It's Annals of the Former World
Mm-hmm.
by John McPhee. I don't know what it was. It's big, it's thick. The cover is really fascinating to me. It has, like kind of this really interesting, like line drawings of, mountains and things like that. And I don't know, how that is when you're in the bookstore and all of a sudden there's just this book that calls out to you and you don't even know really anything about it. And that was the case for this one, but I picked it up and the more I read, it was not only love at first sight, but I thought there might really be something there. So it says, for much of 20 years, John McPhee traveled back and forth across the United States in the company of geologists. His aim was to write a complex work describing a cross-section of North America at about the 40th parallel, and in so doing to give an account of the deep history of the continent, 4.6 billion years, as well as the science of geology and the styles of the geologists he traveled with. And so, not only was it love at first sight, I picked it up and started reading the cover, and I just grabbed it right away, sight unseen, or, not sight unseen, but just not knowing anything about it. But this is where I admit to another thing that often happens with love. I've put it up on a pedestal. I have so afraid to dig in and really get going with it.
You admire it from afar.
Exactly. I just gaze on it.
Idealized this goddess.
Exactly. So I have, full confidence that whenever I do dig in, and I've listed it, I think probably multiple times as a book that I plan to get on this year, bucket list book or whatever. I mean, I still am pretty infatuated with it and can't wait to read it. But yeah, it was definitely one of those where it was just, I wasn't planning on picking it up. I didn't search for it that day, but our eyes met across the crowded bookstore and we were off.
And now you're all for it.
Exactly.
Just haven't read it.
Just haven't read it. There's the only minor detail.
It's so fascinating to me because mine is also a book I have not read yet. Our minds must go in similar places. Love at First Sight, for me, it's a little bit of an interesting thing. It is a book I'd heard about before, both on Backlisted Pod. Jackie talked about it on our Hotels episode. It's Margaret Kennedy's The Feast. But have you seen the McNally edition of this book? It comes out in June.
No.
It's just one of those things where I go, okay, I could go and find this right now. I could find an old copy. I could get it on Kindle. It's available. I want that edition.
Right.
And I know I'm going to love it. It's so, I don't know. It's not like it's this, I don't know. It just struck me when I saw it in their new cover design. I just thought that I need that one. That is the one for me. That's it. I haven't read it yet. I'm going to love it. And yeah, I can't wait. And I see it around, I see people are getting like early copies of it already. So I don't know when I'll be able to get a copy of it, but yeah, Love at First Sight. Again, a book I haven't even read yet. It's all about the visuals here, and what it makes me think of, and how I imagine this relationship is going to be.
Yeah, I can see why. I just looked up the cover. It is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, it just hits me in the right spot. I don't know. There have been plenty of books like that in the past. Like I talked to you about The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearn, the Brian Moore book. The cover by NYRB Classics is one that I just saw in the bookstore. I don't even think I browsed anymore. I picked it up, went to the front, checked it out, and then I started reading it, and I love it. So that one certainly could have applied here, but I also went with one that right now is still on the Love at First Sight phase of this relationship.
We don't want to hear back. We just want it to stay fresh and beautiful like this. We don't want to hear back when it's tattered and,
right.
You've fallen out of love. And
I hope that doesn't happen.
No, I hope not either. And based on everything that I've heard about it, I doubt it will. It really does sound like there's a lot of substance. It's not just on the surface.
No, I'm excited about it. And again, excited for that very edition. I mean, I refuse now to
I can see
ever
why.
read another edition of it. So
nice.
Well, the next one, a book we'd love to check out. I'm curious about this because you texted me and said, "Hey, what's the difference between a book we'd love to check out and a book we'd love to get our hands on?" And I don't know. Tell me.
Yeah. Well, the way I went with, and I don't know if this is what you ended up. So I took it literally. Check out. I think if we're going to go that way, so the library would be the way to go. And if we're thinking about that, I mean, it does tie in pretty well to my approach to the library in general, where it's books that I'm not necessarily willing to commit to. Or books that I would not otherwise get to. If I realistically, I have thousands of books in my home. Those are the ones for the most part that I have, picked up and bought, but there are still, as I try to think of my bulging bookshelves and our budget and all those things, there are those books where you're interested, but you don't necessarily know that you want to pull the trigger. And so often that is what I will do for, a library book. So the one that came to mind for me is one that I've had on my kind of library wish list for a couple years now, and it's called Your House Will Pay by Steph Chaw. I first heard about it on Literary Disco, and the reason that I think I would probably go with the checking it out rather than fully committing to it is it's a crime fiction book, which is not necessarily something that I usually read a lot of. And even if I did, I don't know that it's necessarily one that I would need to own. And maybe I'll be proven wrong, and maybe I'll fall in love and buy it. But um, I read a lot of Richard Price, who is kind of a crime writer, and I really do like his stuff. And there are exceptions to this, but generally that's not a genre that I go into. But Literary Disco did a whole episode on this book, and by the time they were done, I had added it to my list because it really does sound like it would be, really, something that I would go for. It's won a lot of awards, not that that matters, but I think there is a lot of like literary chops to it as well. So I'll just give a quick summary. It says, in the wake of the police shooting of a black teenager, Los Angeles is as tense as it's been since the unrest of the early 1990s. But Grace Park and Sean Matthews have their own problems. Grace is sheltered and largely oblivious, living in the valley with her Korean immigrant parents, working long hours at the family pharmacy. She's distraught that her sister hasn't spoken to their mother in 2 years for reasons beyond Grace's understanding. Sean has already had enough of politics and protest after an act of violence shattered his family years ago. He just wants to be left alone to enjoy his life in Palmdale. But when another shocking crime hits LA, both the Park and Matthews families are forced to face down their history while navigating the tumult of a city on the brink of more violence. So, I don't know. It just,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, after hearing them talk about it for an hour, and they were just raving about it and saying how good and compelling but powerful it was, I was like, okay, I'm willing to kind of give that a try, even though it doesn't sound like something that would normally be in my normal range. So that's one. It's been a couple years, and so I haven't quite committed yet, but one of these days I'm going to check it out.
Well, I had the same approach. I went with a book that I want to check out at the library for a similar reason. It looks great. I'm kind of interested, but I don't want to buy it. I don't want to own it. And I went with a book that's the only book I have currently on hold. So this is really a book I am going to check out as
Okay.
soon as it comes back in. And I'm really excited. I don't have high hopes, but it just, the feel of this description. This is called Keeper of Enchanted Rooms by Charlie N. Holmberg. Not an author I know much about, but looks like someone that's been writing for a while. Rhode Island, 1846. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. I like the setting. I like the year. Estranged from his family, writer Merritt Fernsby, a writer, yes, you got me, is surprised when he inherits a remote estate on the Narragansett Bay. I don't know how to say that exactly. Sorry, Rhode Island folk. Though the property has been uninhabited for more than a century, Merritt is ready to call it home until he realizes he has no choice. With its doors slamming shut and locking behind him, Wimbrel House is not about to let Merritt leave.
Ooh.
Ever. The ever as its own sentence is why I'm a little bit like, I don't know, if this is cutesy, don't want it necessarily, but I do think that that setting and just the haunted house-ish kind of story, it sounds
Yeah.
fun. I don't know, the thing about a book I can check out, give it a shot. If I don't like it, I'll take it back to the library and someone else can get it.
You're not committed.
Not committed to it over any long period of time. And so that can be a problem too, because I know I check out books that I'm sure I would like, but because I don't have to commit to them, I don't commit to them. I don't.
Right.
I just, I don't know. It's a little bit weird. I have a hard time sometimes reading books I've checked out from the library, and I think that might be part of it anyway.
No, I
But
think
we'll
you're
see.
right. It's that whole, it's like a psychological, going into it, you have not really like given yourself over to the idea of giving it the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, no, I think I do that too.
And you only have a certain amount of time to commit to it. So I feel that pressure. It's like my family's telling me, go on a date, go, and
That's
you'll
right.
love it. Go
Yeah.
now. I want to hear about it tomorrow. We're going to tell family. No,
Yeah.
I'm not even going to go out on this date now.
That's right.
I'm going to check it out and keep it on my bedstand until it's due and take it back.
Exactly.
So,
I love it. That's funny. Yeah, that does sound very intriguing. You'll have to report back.
I'll let you know. Again, I don't have the highest of hopes, but it sounded fun and I want to give it a shot. So,
yeah. Cool.
All right. Next one is a little bit problematic, Paul. I don't know where you took this, but be careful. Book we'd love to get our hands on.
Yes, that is a little problematic. No, this one probably, for me, maybe crossed over a little bit. It could have been Love at First Sight. maybe a little bit. And for me, it's one that might not be very original, because I think a lot of people would like to get their hands on this book, and some of you already have. It's the new translation of Kafka's Diaries by Ross Benjamin.
Oh, yes, and you do need to get your hands on that.
Yes.
It is so pleasant to hold in your hands.
Ah,
I mean, just to
yeah.
talk about a book as something to hold and look at, and even if you're not reading it, yes.
Yeah. No, it's one of those, like I
So
said,
superficial.
it is. And the funny thing is, like, I have read Kafka, but I wouldn't say that I've read a lot of his stuff. And so it's so funny that for me, this is a case of definitely, we talk about the zeitgeist or the peer pressure, and it's not pressure, but just everybody is talking this book up and having such powerful experiences with it, like Merve Imre and Mark Haber, I think, and a bunch of other people I've seen that are just like,
Hmm.
you. And so,
I really am enjoying it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this is one where I just can't wait to get it. I have a few gift cards from leftover from the holidays. They're kind of burning a hole in my pocket, and I'm thinking it's meant to be. So I'm wondering too, though, like, are you taking it as an inspiration to kind of revisit or visit or delve into more of his works? Like, is it kind of a
Yeah.
point for you? Because that's what I could see it being for me.
Yeah. So I am taking that. I pulled all my Kafka down
Mm-hmm.
so that I could do kind of a little bit of everything and just make this a fun venture into his work. Not like today.
Yeah.
It is today, but it's not meant to be just a short term thing. I just thought I want to get to know more about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I pulled them out and have been delving into a little bit of everything. You know, the fantastic Rainer Stock biographies that Shelley Frisch translated. I've got those out.
Mm.
I've got Metamorphosis. I don't have it in here, but that really fun Penguin deluxe edition of that.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, it's just exciting. Again, it's about that experience you just know you're going to have.
Yeah.
By the way, so I don't know. I was charged twice for my copy, and this is not a cheap book. It's like 40. It was like $45,
Yeah.
and I was charged twice for it. And if I can't get that figured out, I want the other copy, and I'll send it to you. If
Well,
I can
thank
get
you.
it figured out, I'll get it refunded and do
Right.
something else with that money. But if I can't get it sorted, then I may have another copy because
Oh.
I can see it on my statement. I was charged twice.
Wow. Yeah, like you said,
And
that's not a cheap, like, a if that
right.
happened at a used bookstore, you would say that's fine. But
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. I would use it to go after the book I want to get my hands on.
Okay.
I have a double volume, and each of them are expensive, like $40 per volume.
Mm-hmm.
But man, and part of the reason it's expensive is they're expensive, but also you have to import these. It's the Penguin Book of French Short Stories, volumes 1 and 2.
Mm.
These were edited by Patrick McGuinness and released by Penguin just last year in the UK in October. The first volume is from Marie de France to Marcel Proust, and then the second volume takes it from there, from Colette to Marie Ndiaye, and they look beautiful. And I just realized as I'm sitting here talking about this is, I don't think why, but there's this beautiful art of a woman on the front.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just, and one of them is in normal, the color, what you'd expect, kind of realist. And then the second volume is another version of the painting where it's, the colors are shifted. It's bright red and dark blue background of the same picture. Um, I should have looked up exactly what painting it is
Mm.
and who painted it. I would imagine it's French.
Probably. It's
um,
probably a safe bet.
but my apologies. But they just, they're these big thick um, hardback books. Ah,
Yeah.
I want to get my hands on it. I don't actually know if I'm going to. We'll see. Um,
You have one or you don't have either.
I don't have either of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm gonna order them from England, and who knows what for them.
Yeah.
But that is a book. It's the double volume that
Mm-hmm.
I want to get my hands on.
It sounds really good. You should see if Blackwell's has them, because they are, they have that wonderful free shipping to the
Oh
US.
yeah,
Maybe
I
that would be a
haven't
way to
looked
do
at
it.
that. I
Yeah.
have not looked at that. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that right when we're done.
Yeah. And we'll report back, and I hope for your sake that you get the refund for the other one so that you can go out and delve into it as much
I,
as the other option
I
intrigues
appreciate
me.
that.
Yeah.
But like I say, if it doesn't work out,
Yeah.
then I will set you up. Assuming they'll even give me another. Maybe they're not. I don't. Who knows? It was
Right.
Barnes and Noble. I don't
Yeah,
know what'll
okay.
happen there.
Well, maybe
But
one way or another, this book that we want to get our hands on, one of us will have, the conclusion of the story will be a happy one.
right, one of us will be torn away, pining forever.
That's right. The
The
other
other
will
one
live
will
happily
have
ever after.
perfect ending. Jane Austen versus Charlotte
Thomas
Bronte.
Hardy. Yeah, Charlotte Bronte.
All right. Well, let's go on with the book with which we have a committed long-term relationship.
Yes, this one, as most committed long-term relationships, will surprise no one. I've been very public about it. People have seen us together for years and years. They've heard about it.
A little
David
bit embarrassing
Copperfield.
sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. There's no other book that I could pick for a committed long-term relationship. It's just been ever present in my life from the time I was young, watching my mom reading it once a year, as I've mentioned, to me starting to kind of pick it up. And as you're young, you start to have that feeling of like, what is it that's so intriguing about this? And so you flip through it and look at some of the pictures, or and then read a little bit, and eventually delved into it. I've read it now twice, and think about it all the time. I will probably read it again soon. Like, my wife is reading it right now, so it's just one of those that it's just part of the family, I guess. Just it's always like a committed long-term relationship. It's at all the family reunions. I've introduced it to all of the cousins, that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I just love everything about him in general, but this book in particular. Just such a great cast of characters, all the Dickensian, messiness and drama and humor and sadness and all those things that draw me into him. I feel like this book has them, overflowing. So yeah, I couldn't think of any other book that would be more of a good choice for me than that.
Oh, that's lovely, Paul. Lovely.
Thank
I
you.
love seeing you together, by the way.
Thank
Good
you.
couple.
Yeah, exactly. We've
um,
what is it? Worn off all the rough edges. We fit together perfectly. So
do you have a particular edition that you love? Just to make this again Valentine's Day
yeah,
superficial.
the funny thing is, not necessarily. And if anything, it would probably be this old, like, my mom, the version she always read was, I don't know if it was like a Reader's Digest, but those kind of like faux fancy
Mm-hmm.
hardback books that were, I don't know if it was from maybe the 70s or the 80s. And she still has that copy, and that's the copy that I first read and the one that she loaned to me. So it's not tattered, it's in good shape, but it's well read.
Yeah.
And that would probably be the one that would come to mind for me. I mean, I do have just
Nice.
like a Penguin paperback that I've picked up. So there's no like specific attachment to that copy, but yeah, I would say that would be the one that my mom had and or still has, and that was kind of the first time I read it. That would definitely be the one that I would associate with that.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's nice. Lovely
yeah,
way for that to come together.
for sure. Yeah, exactly.
Listeners, you should see Paul right now. He's beaming. He's
I am.
beaming talking about David Copperfield.
Yeah, it's one of those rare times where the love that your parents tried to get you to she'd be perfect for you. Oh yeah, right, yeah, right. Oh wait, they're right. So
They're right. We're so happy.
exactly.
Oh, well, my book is the collected stories of William Trevor.
Yes.
And in particular, that beautiful Penguin Viking. Again, it came from the UK. My wife imported it for me
Mm.
good 15 years ago. Uh, it's a 2-volume set. You've probably seen it. I
I
take a
have.
lot of pictures on Instagram with it in the background because I love it so much, and it makes me look better. It's one of those kind of relationships.
Right.
I'm a better person because of this book set. But in particular, I'm a better person, and I know this is true because of William Trevor's writing.
Mm.
I have learned to be more compassionate, more attentive, more empathetic, more forgiving, more less judgmental. I don't know how to say that. But anyway, less judgmental, probably enough to say it like that. Um, and just more accepting about the people around me,
Mm.
but also more in tune with the vicissitudes of life. I go to these stories and you get humor, and you get fun, you get love, you get sadness, you get loneliness, you get pain and terror and intrigue, and it's all done in such beautiful stories and beautiful writing and with a beautiful voice behind it. I don't know William Trevor. I've listened to a lot of speeches by him,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. There's just something about. I do think I could have been very happy sitting down and just listening to him for a while.
Mm.
I do think that I would have loved to have known him as a person. I don't know. That's dangerous to do, but
Right.
I kind of feel like, I knew the opposite with Philip Roth. I think he probably wouldn't have cared much to sit down with me. I don't know if I would have added to this relationship, but it's someone that I just really respect his perspective on these things.
Mm.
And maybe I'm completely wrong, and I don't need to have him in the background, but I do picture him telling me these stories. I've listened to him read so many of them
Mm-hmm.
on YouTube or on podcasts when he's done those, when he did them.
Mm-hmm.
I loved listening to him read these stories. And so yeah, that this particular set, if there was a fire in the house, I would, probably not get any of these things out of it. I don't know. But
That would
I
be,
think
yeah.
this would be the thing I would go and grab because
Mm-hmm.
I treasure it in particular in this particular edition. And again, it's a gift from my wife. I don't know how readily available this set is anymore. It doesn't have everything in it because he did write, some more stories after it, but
Mm.
it's pretty close. And
Yeah.
I've got the last stories as well. It sits right next to him, and so I think I have everything that he wrote in terms of short stories, just sitting in the same place out in the living room
Mm.
where it's often in the background of my pictures.
Yeah. Yeah. I do remember you. I remember seeing that in the background, and it's absolutely beautiful. I remember you talking about it, and I've added it to my wish list. But I think it is relatively hard to find. I haven't done a
Mm-hmm.
ton of research because I have the selected stories, that kind of bright yellow and
Mm-hmm.
purple hardback, which is beautiful in its own right.
It is, yeah. I have
But
had that in the past,
yeah,
and then I think I gave it to someone because I didn't need it.
yeah, no, that the copy that you have, I keep an eye out for it in used bookstores, and if I'm ever lucky enough to stumble upon it, I will definitely snatch it up because, like you said, it's absolutely beautiful. So, no, that makes total sense. I don't think anybody will be shocked by either of our long term relationships.
No,
Yeah.
and that is okay. I am curious. I have a hard time even if I'm like trying to show somebody, like, because when I post pictures of it specifically, inevitably someone's like, "What is that?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll send them the thing, and sometimes I even have problems like finding specific pictures of it
Right.
online or a place where it's even available.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also, for example, I just clicked on one that I thought was it, but it's not. It's only $10, and it's just a soft cover, um, and it's the New York. So yeah, you got to be careful too, because if you click on just the picture, it might not give you the actual this edition of it.
Yeah. Right. But like I said, I always like having those, those
Yeah.
ideal experiences where, like, as I'm nosing around in a used bookstore, it's very unlikely that you'll ever find certain editions of a book, but that's kind of the fun of it, is like, if you ever do, it's like this, the light shines from on high and the music starts playing. And so, yeah, no, that's
And
a great
yep.
choice.
Well, fun. I thought that was fun, Paul. Thank you for indulging on the kind of weird idea, but I enjoyed the conversation, and I enjoyed, again, part of the fun of all of this is just to celebrate books and get excited. But I do find when I'm talking with you about these things and putting it in different terms and such, I learn a bit about me and about what I'm enjoying. It's a little bit reflective. It sticks a little bit more
Hmm.
and put some words to give all this some shape. I enjoyed that.
I did too. Yeah. And I would actually just say, like, if anybody out there wants to join in the fun and the silliness of it,
Absolutely.
pick any of the categories that we chose, or make up a few of your own related to love of books. And we'd love to have you send them in, or
Oh,
on Twitter, or however you want to do it. But it'd be fun to hear from people.
we need somebody to make like a graphic where people can fill in their thing for
Yeah.
Instagram or Twitter and just fill it in and let us know, some of these categories. So just to recap then. case someone's listening who wants to do that. A book you broke up with. A book you regret that it just wasn't meant to be. A fling. It's complicated. Love at first sight. Book we'd love to check out. Book we'd love to get our hands on. And book with which we have a committed long-term relationship. So that was fun.
That was fun. I can't wait to hear if anybody has any ideas. And like you said, if there's any graphic artists, or at the very least somebody who wants to they can hand draw it, doesn't matter to me. But
it doesn't matter to me either. I just don't know if I would do well with even spreading the word on it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No pressure. If anybody wants to do that, would be fun. But either way, this has been a lot of fun. And like you said, it's just always a good time to kind of look at books through a different lens. There's so many different ways to approach them. And I don't know, it's always interesting to kind of look at your bookshelves with something in mind, and it's inspiring to kind of remind you of books that you might have forgotten about or that you'd like to pick up, and lots of good stuff.
Well, listeners, we will be back after Valentine's Day in a couple of weeks. We don't know exactly what our topics are going to be. We again kind of took the holidays and we've been relaxing. Not that we haven't been reading or chatting, but some of that discipline to have multiple episodes planned out, we'll get there. We will get that back up so that it's in our newsletter. Might even be in this newsletter. Maybe we'll be able to talk a little bit offline and get some plans for the next few episodes solidified. We've got a lot of ideas. It's a matter of just figuring out which ones feel like the right time for it. But we will be back soon. Let us know if you have any comments, feedback, or especially any of this book love. I'd love to hear about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mooks and the Gripes podcast. You can follow the Mooks and the Gripes and get show notes and book and film reviews at mooksandgripes.com. On Twitter, you can follow Trevor at Mooks and Paul at BiblioPaul. You can also get information about future shows on our Patreon. If you'd like to donate to the show, anything and everything, even $1 a month helps and is deeply appreciated. You can become a Patreon at patreon.com/mooks. Until next time,